Hi, this is my review of World of Warcraft, the board game. This box is somewhat heavy, it weighs about 3 kilograms, which is 6.6 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm also going to be reviewing the only 2 expansions that came out for the game, which is Shadow of War and the Burning Crusade. This review is going to focus more on my experience with the game and some gameplay aspects rather than showing you all of the components, because there's just a lot of stuff here. There are a lot of miniatures and tokens and cards, etc, etc. Well, let's get started. World of Warcraft, the computer game, I considered it to be one of the greatest MMORPGs when I first played it. I know that it has changed quite a bit since when it first came out, but the first 2 years that I played it, I quit about that time. It was pretty impressive. It had so many things that I would consider improvements when compared to other MMORPGs. You had it was really user friendly and casual friendly as well. You could go on many adventures with a small group or even solo. And the raid system, when you first started getting to raids and quests that require a larger number of people, it was also really impressive. And I have many fun memories when I organized groups to go into Horde territory, and when there were some risky situations in which I came out triumphant. Like, for example, there were these, I forget the technical name, these like instances where you went into a sort of battlefield. You were part of an army. At that time I was part of the alliance against the Horde army, so you fought against other players. And I was with a small group and we got ambushed, and I managed to get out alive of that one, but all of my party members died. So I went up this snowy mountain to try to regroup with the main force. But when I arrived, there were a lot of corpses all over the place, both from the Horde and from the Alliance. And I didn't know what exactly happened, and then I saw this Sasquatch or Yeti-like monster, and he had killed almost everyone. In World of Warcraft there are some pretty powerful monsters, and because he was quite wounded, but I was also wounded because of the ambush, I decided to take a chance and try to kill him myself, and I actually ended up killing that monster with just a small sliver of health left, and I got a pretty cool spear because of that. So there are just so many fun memories. But I eventually had to quit World of Warcraft because it just took too much time. I couldn't focus on other forms of entertainment besides my duties, besides school and other stuff. So I didn't have enough time and let's say resources to get into organizing a guild or forming part of a guild. So I eventually quit, but I spent so many great moments when playing World of Warcraft. Now let's talk about the quality of the components. The quality in general is great. The only thing that could be better in my opinion, but to be fair, I've used the box quite a bit, is that the cover of the box is already coming a bit apart, as you can see here. But in general, everything has held well together. And I'm going to explain the base game first, and I will talk about how the expansions improved things, because this game is one of my favorite board games, probably of all time, and you could say one of the best adventure board games that I have had. Probably the only one that somewhat matches it, or perhaps it's even better, but it all depends on the type of thing that you want to play, is Mage Knight the board game. So let's get started. you have instruction booklets for the all of the expansions. One is quite small, for the Shadow of War expansion, but the other two are somewhat large. They are printed in glossy paper, and while they're not terribly disorganized, there are some sections that could have been better, in my opinion. You read some rules and suddenly they put some other rules that have almost no relation to the concepts that you are learning, or sometimes you're trying to understand something and you have to flip through the pages to understand that section better. So it's kind of like those rule books that you have to go back and forth until you get a rule. And the base game comes with everything that you need to play, of course, but it felt lacking at times, not that much, but with the base game it just felt like, oh, it's a good experience, but it wasn't like out of this world. And you will see that the expansions changed that completely. I actually got this game because there was a pre-order incentive that if you pre-order the game, you would get a golden miniature of one of the character classes and a map of Lord Iron. But the map wasn't very durable, in my opinion. It lasted like... It kind of fell apart after 6 or 7 years. It was basically the more simplified version of the board. This is the board. Let me see if I can get that into focus. As you can see, it's pretty big. You need a lot of table space to play this game. And you have a lot of sheets, and there's just a lot of components and content. So, with the base game, you basically have an objective. You need to kill an overlord. One of the main bosses that you would find in the computer game, there was Nefarian, Kel'Thuzad, and this other guy, I forget his name. I think it was Lord Kazak. I think that was his name. And so, to do that, you needed to level up your character and customize that character with different powers and weapons, armor, items, etc. And that's one of the things that I love so much about World of Warcraft the board game. It feels a lot like a tabletop role-playing game. It's basically a very mechanized version of a role-playing game. And so you have two different teams. This can be played with up to 6 players. That is 2 to 6. But you could also play it solo. I actually experimented playing solo and it works quite well. You just have to modify a few things, because this is one of those games that feel a bit like a solitaire multiplayer, like they call them. Let me see if I can show you some of the miniatures, because they're quite awesome. This is the Metal Paladin that I got for pre-ordering the game. Let's see if I can get him into focus. Sorry about that. And you also have a lot of miniatures representing all the different adventurers. You have a hunter and the orc warrior. You have this night elf warrior. And these miniatures are quite useful. They're great for tabletop role-playing games. There's a good variety of them. You have gnomes, undead, etc. And so you move through the map of the game, trying to complete quests. And it's quite fun and quite thematic. The quests usually involve killing enemies. And the game feels quite strategic and tactical. each time you play, you are thinking, oh, maybe I should focus on finishing the green quests first, or maybe I should take things easier and finish off the gray quests that are easier than the green quests. And or maybe you want to sabotage the other team, because there is a player versus player combat. There are ways to attack the other team. For the most part, I wouldn't recommend it because you spend too much energy, health, because all special attacks here are handled by the spending energy, and when you get hit, you lose your health. And sometimes it's worth it to explore around the map and complete all the different quests and objectives, because they give a lot of rewards. When you kill the opposing team, and that's killed very lightly speaking, because they don't die definitely, they just go to the nearest graveyard and they revive, but with little health and energy. And when you beat the other team, you get one of their items. It's your choice of the things that they carry in their bag, because the components are quite nice, and in the sense that they remind you a lot of the video game. That is, you feel that like you have an inventory screen of sorts. So for example, here you can see a little spell book that is used to mark where you keep your special abilities and powers, and you have a bag to show where you keep your potions, etc., spare weapons. And you have these sheets as well to organize everything. So for example, this is the sheet for the Tauren Hunter, and you put your gold, health, energy, and all of those spaces right there are you can place weapons and special powers. And down here you have the spaces for the talents. And talents play a big part in customizing your character. That's the way that you become more offensive or more defensive, and that way you can work with any type of party configuration. Because in this game, if someone chooses, for example, the hunter, let's say you play for the horde and you choose the hunter, the alliance cannot play as the hunter because the sheet is double-sided. You have this side for the horde and the other side for the alliance player. So I think it's a good choice, because that way I think player versus player combat could take quite a while because of the similar powers. And so, as I was saying, you start trying to level up as fast as possible, because there's a time limit. You have 30 turns before something happens, usually related to the overlord or overboss that you are fighting. Because, for example, there are some bosses that are slowly moving towards a town, and you have to, or a city, and you have to stop them. That is, if you don't finish the game by the time they reach that, you will be forced to fight that boss. There are many rules, options, and variants to change this end game situation. Because, for example, there is an option that even though something happens related to the boss, you keep on playing, and you could win the game almost whenever you like. But there are also other situations in which the time is up, that is 30 turns have passed, and you need to fight the other team in a final player versus player confrontation. And I think that if you played the PC game of the World of Warcraft, you're going to get a lot more immersed. I just went around the map and I was imagining all of the places that I visited while playing World of Warcraft. All those moody places in the Northlands, and I immediately imagined the ziggurats in the Plaguelands, the Scarlet Monastery, etc. It's all really thematic. But I've played this with people who haven't played the World of Warcraft video game, and they also found it quite powerful in theme. And better yet, with some illustrations that are presented here in cards and in the instruction manual. You can see all the lands that you will visit, and you feel like you are adventuring. Even right now, as I am talking about this game, I cannot wait to play it. It kind of feels like you're going into this magical world. It's quite amazing. Now, when it comes to combat, it's somewhat fiddly, and it's a bit of a dice fest, because you basically have all these powers and abilities and weapons, and they give you dice to roll. You roll 8-sided dice of different colors, and for example, any weapon that is a ranged weapon like guns and bows, etc., they give you blue dice, and those dice, when you roll them, they are the ones that will give you an opportunity to kill your opponent because before that opponent attacks you. So it's kind of like you're taking him out at a distance. But and you also have like axes and swords and staves that give you red dice, so that you make the roll, and that serves as sort of like protection. But at the same time, you could also damage your opponent with that. And you also have green dice that is related to armor and shields. And these are only useful to protect yourself, but they do not deal damage, obviously. And so each turn you roll your blue dice, you check to see if you kill the enemy, and then the enemy attacks you. You have some reference sheets. I don't think I have them here, as I have all the components spread out through the entire... Oh, here they are. These are like your references to see the power of each monster, the health, and as I was telling you, if you didn't kill them with your blue dice, the enemy attacks you, and let's say they deal 10 damage, depending if you're fighting a single monster. If you're fighting a group of them, they deal the sum of all their attacks. And you check to see if your red dice and green dice stop this attack. So maybe you only have like, let's say, 5 of defense and they deal 10 damage. Then you're going to lose 5 health, because 10 minus 5, you have 5. And if you survive that, then you deal all of your melee damage, and it's possible that you can kill the enemy, and you're going to get treasure and experience. And it's quite exciting to get treasure and experience. There are a lot of items, a lot of weapons, a lot of everything that give you different color dice, give you the ability to re-roll your dice, give you the ability to spot dice. That is basically, that it says something like, if you roll a 6 or above, you recover health, and you are, I'm spotting these dice because I rolled 7, so I'm recovering health. And it's quite cool. But I was telling you, you have all these like little cheats. You can see in this example here, this is a combat example, and all of those little like red bluish balls are cheats that you are using to mark the different blue dice and red dice and green dice that you that were successful when you roll them. And you have that area on the board, those large circles, where you place all those cheats to keep track of the damage that you are dealing, of the damage that you are mitigating because of your defense. So sometimes combat is not confusing, but it does take a bit of a while. And that's one of what some players consider it a negative of the board game, that turns can take a bit of a while. There's a lot of, what would you say, downtime between each turn. And if you are playing with players that do not have like a good attention span, that if they aren't doing something, they get distracted and something else, it could be a bit of a not too fun for them. But for the most part, I've played with really focused players, and I consider myself someone who focuses quite a bit on things, so it wasn't too much of a problem. Everybody was always aware of what the other team was doing, and they didn't get bored like, oh, is he going to attack that region, or is he going to play it safe and move around near town, etc. Because each turn you have 2 actions per character. So you could, for example, travel to other regions. You usually move 1 or 2 regions, and if you have a mount, you could move up to 3 regions. Or you could take a rest action to recover your wounds and energy. You could take a challenge action, that is challenge a particular quest. And or you could take a training action to purchase new powers. Or a town action to go to the merchant and purchase new weapons, armor, etc. And so each turn could take a bit of time, usually about 5 or 7 minutes per player turn. It could speed up a bit after you have experience with the game, but it's not a game for impatient people. And this is just the base game, as I was saying. It's also important to mention that as you explore the map, there are also independent creatures, which are basically blue creatures, that is, the miniatures are blue, that are slightly more powerful than green creatures that are related to lower level quests, and they do not give you rewards for killing them. And a lot of players hated that. They were like, you kill blue creatures and they almost end up killing the entire party and they don't give you anything. So and that was a bit like a negative side for some people. I consider it more like an obstacle to represent that they were just there to give make you think about where to go, because sometimes you had to go around a region that was filled with blue independent creatures, and that also added to the strategy of the game. That also reminds me of why the Shadow of War expansion is quite improves quite a bit many things of the game, because blue creatures with this expansion, they give you rewards. So then if you had to fight a blue creature and you killed it, you would get some rewards. And the Shadow of War expansion really improves the game a lot. If the game before felt like, oh, it's a good game, with the Shadow of War expansion, you would say it's a great game. Because the Shadow of War expansion also adds more talents and powers. And that's what felt somewhat limiting on the base game, because after playing 3 times, you notice that a single character class didn't have too many options, and there were only like a couple of effective ways in which you could customize your character, and it started to feel a bit repetitive at times. The Shadow of War expansion also adds new item cards related to those blue creatures that you could kill, and destiny cards that feel a bit like event cards in the base game. I forgot to talk about that. The event cards in the base game, they are basically there positioned at different times of the turn scale. So for example, in turn 5, let's say, you would draw a card and it would say, oh, there is this special event in that part of the map. If you have characters in this region and that region, you get a prize. And those were the moments where the players clashed more often, because that quest or that event applied to both the Horde and the Alliance side of things. So everybody was racing to get to those areas, because that's pretty cool. You could form parties, or you could go on your separate way, solo, and usually the solo player was the stronger, because he was obviously going to be targeted by the opposing players, because it's easier to attack 2 against 1. And that also added more strategic depth to the game. And Destiny cards feel a bit like that, but they're more like environment cards in other board games. Like, they are set on the board and they give you like a condition. If you kill this monster, you will gain this, or from now on every player that does this gains this, or suffer that. So there were different conditions that modify the entire game, and some of them were also related to the bosses, Kel'Thuzad, Lord Kazak, Nefarian. And that also enhanced the theme, because when you had Kel'Thuzad as the main enemy, everything felt somewhat necromantic, to put it in a way. Or Nefarian, everything had a more of a savage feel to it. Lord Kazak had a special feature that he actually was hidden in a random region on the board. So if you actually became strong enough and you were like, okay, it's time to kill Lord Kazak, you would have to search around the map to see if you could get to him first before the other players did. So that again, that enhanced the strategy and also the tactical aspect of the game, because the other players were always changing their tactics and getting new weapons and new abilities, and you had to think, oh, this is not going to work, I need to do something else. And the expansion also added powers that you could change almost at any time, because you could only change your items and powers at the end of a turn. But before that, no, it was pretty much impossible. But you do have this sort of like fast powers, to put it in a way, that you could change at almost any time. And that's the way how the Shadow of War expansion greatly enhanced the base game. But what really made this game what I would consider a perfect fantasy adventure experience was the Burning Crusade expansion, because it added another map, another board, and you also needed more table space. There's actually a section in the rulebook that tells you tips on how to save space on your table, etc. Because they even gave you the advice that it would be a good idea to put two tables, like the main table and a card game table or something, or whatever, a chair or a box to put the other things on. This is the Burning Crusade map. And this is a map where you can travel from the other main map and this one. So you actually felt like you were moving across different continents. This expansion really added a lot of things. Just a lot of things. Let me show you some of the miniatures first. Let's see if I can get some of them. You had some small ones like this worgen. This you have a lot of useful, let's say, races, so to speak, for different role-playing games, and that's a great positive side of this game. If you play tabletop role-playing games, you have a lot of Morlocks and Nagas and different monsters that could serve as fishmen in another game, or different types of wolfmen, etc. There are also some larger miniatures. I'll see if I can get... Excuse me for a bit. Here's one of the larger ones. My favorite large miniature would probably be... Let's see if I can find... here it is. The Abomination. You probably remember those guys from Warcraft 3 and of World of Warcraft. You can see all those guts and intestines coming out. It's a pretty cool miniature. So as I was telling you, the Burning Crusade really enhanced things, because it not only added another map, you could also take your character to higher levels of power. You would usually only take it to level 5. But with this, you could take your character to level 6. You even had like a small slip of paper or another section of the board that you could add. So for example, you had this character sheet, and to get him to level 6, you added this other piece that goes right here. And you had new characters. So for example, now you have a paladin for the horde, a blood elf, and you also had a shaman for the alliance, and you also had new bosses. A new normal boss, to put it in a way, which is Ragnaros. That is, this boss was used with the main map of the base game. But you also had other powerful bosses that you could only use when you were using the other map. Some pretty famous, like Kael'thas. Or the most powerful boss in the entire game, of course, Illidan Stormrage. And these bosses were quite powerful, and because you needed a lot more time to get ready to face them, the time limit of the game was sometimes removed. They have this optional rule that said if you reach turn 30, you keep on playing, because you need more time to get more powerful weapons, artifacts, etc. And so some games could take quite a bit. When playing with experienced players and only using the base game, it usually took, if you were playing with, let's say, 2 or 3 people, probably between 2 to 4 hours. But if you played with 6 people, you could actually take like 8 hours or more sometimes, especially if there was a bit of analysis paralysis. So this is a really long game, something that should be played over the weekend. Other things that the Burning Crusade expansion added that almost transformed the entire game entirely were dungeons. And dungeons were basically different regions in the map that had a dungeon, and you needed to. They felt sort of like a push your luck experience. Once you went inside a dungeon, you started drawing cards, and you did not stop until you got a dungeon boss. When you got a card representing a dungeon boss, you could decide to fight that boss or keep on drawing cards. The other cards would be minions and treasure, and you would say, well, why would you want to draw more minions? Because each minion, even though it makes the boss stronger, that is, it added like, oh, the boss rolls more red dice, or the boss gets more rerolls and stuff like that. They also enhance the reward and the experience and the gold that you will get from killing that boss. And sometimes you would get a lot of treasure cards and no minions, so it was also like a very lucky thing. So it was a game of push your luck with the dungeons, and there are treasures that are specific to different dungeon bosses, and so you wanted to go into the dungeon to get those cards, and you could never be sure what type of dungeon boss you're going to face. And there were quite a bit of, let's see, 4 dungeons in total, and that's not counting the ones on the Outland. The Outland had like 3 more bosses in the dungeon, sorry if I'm not mistaken. So there was a lot of replayability there. The expansion had a few more things like special powers, more talents if I'm not mistaken. So overall the experience became just massive and quite enjoyable. I think I love this game quite a bit because I played the World of Warcraft video game, but because I play tabletop role-playing games, they kind of mesh together perfectly. And because of all the stuff, the dungeons, the different power cards, the talent cards, the different classes, the new classes, the old classes, all of the different monsters. The expansion also added new monsters to fight again. All of the different areas that you can visit with your flying mount. Some areas cannot be accessed until you have your flying mount, and you can go over the mountain and such. And all of different quest cards, and they have flavor text. It makes it feel more thematic, because there are some Fantasy Flight games that have flavor text and it seems quite cheesy and tacky at times, but here I think that it's written quite well. And because of all the little graphics that they use, taken from the official Blizzard illustrations or from the the computer game, it felt like you were playing World of Warcraft quite a bit. I could almost imagine the songs and seeing that gloomy sky, depending on the area that you were adventuring in, or the different cities. When you entered the town, you almost felt like they were going to sing that song they always played when you entered pretty much any place. So this is one of my favorite board games. To sum it up of what I think of the entire experience, the base game was okay. The Shadow of War expansion made it a great game, but with the Burning Crusade expansion, it's just unique, almost, in my opinion, almost flawless. This is a perfect game for me. I still play it. I keep playing it. Now that I've just made the review, I want to play it. Even if I don't find players, I'm going to play it solo, because this is an amazing game. And also it's quite difficult. You could also modify different things to make it more lethal or easier, but who wants to make it easier? Yeah, it's better when you have that sense of risk. One of the solo variants that I recommend is that, for example, when you have to fight the boss, if he kills you, it's game over, and that makes it more difficult. But I also recommend that you play it as a multiplayer experience. I think the only thing that I was telling you that could be a negative for some people, the downtime between turns, that could get some players could get restless. But other than that, I just love it. This is one of the best board games that I have ever played. Sadly, it's out of print. You can still get it on eBay probably, or some other places. I actually purchased the Shadow War expansion when it was in near mint condition. So it was a bit of a quest to get that expansion. And it's also, I think this game represents that moment where Fantasy Flight Games cared a lot about their expansions, that they weren't just producing expansion month after month after month. They really took their time to design great expansions. There was no errata. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think there was an errata released for any of these things, because nowadays you see pages and pages of errata of different descent and such. So the level of quality and design is just too out of this world to exaggerate it a bit. It's sad that they didn't keep producing these expansions. I would have purchased each and every one of the expansions for this board game. I think it was because the Blizzard license was quite expensive, and they didn't sell as many copies to support that license. I think it was mainly because not all of the board gamers played the PC game, the World of Warcraft, so they didn't feel as excited about this game, because as I was telling you, and this is almost a perfect system. Even though some people complain that, oh, there's a lot of downtime, and oh, I don't like blue creatures, etc. The experience not only makes you feel like you are playing World of Warcraft, it's also a great board game by itself. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.